Manchester City forgotten forward knows how to change Pep Guardiola plans. Omar Marmoush hit a high point at Manchester City the last time Bournemouth were in town, but now he faces a battle to play. Omar Marmoush scored the goal of the season when Manchester City hosted Bournemouth last season. It was voted as the best strike seen anywhere in the Premier League for a campaign that Marmoush had only arrived in halfway through. Enticed from Frankfurt in January with the promise of the minutes that Julian Alvarez had enjoyed, Marmoush spent a good chunk of his time filling in for an injured Erling Haaland, and the Norwegian's absences should not take anything away from the credit for City's new signing outscoring him and all of his teammates with 7 league goals. The fact that Marmoush's strike came just days after he had missed a crucial penalty in the FA Cup final, having been handed the ball by Haaland, was a reminder that the Egyptian was here to stay, and he started the final game of the season at Fulham later that week. For all City had lost that year, Marmoush was a find. Except, as Bournemouth prepare to visit the Etihad again, it will take something exceptional from Marmoush against Swansea in the League Cup to force his way back into the team by Sunday. 9 players have scored for City this season, if you include Burnley's Maxime Esteve with 2, but Marmoush hasn't found the net since his wonder goal. Injury accounts for most of that, although he was not massively effective positioned out on the left wing in the early games and has not been rushed back into action. Pep Guardiola brought on 4 players at Aston Villa in search of an equaliser before finally turning to Marmoush with just 10 minutes to go. Perhaps summing up his season so far, Marmoush looked to have crossed for Haaland to score a late equaliser, but had moved too early and was correctly flagged offside. Guardiola has had concerns for some time that the team aren't scoring enough goals to support Haaland when he can't find the net, as happened at Villa, and Marmoush is the prime candidate to do that. He has to be on the pitch to do that though, and then playing well. The first of those has to happen against Swansea in midweek. It has long been penciled in, and lower league opposition offer Marmoush the opportunity to feel his way back into form. That can also work against the Egyptian though, for if he cannot take any chances in South Wales in midweek, he runs the risk of the level of team he has faced counting against him. Marmoush has lots of work to do to get back to the point where he is forcing Guardiola to play him in the same team as Haaland. That likely won't happen before Bournemouth on Sunday. But the quickest way he can do that is to provide goals and assists, because at the minute there is very little competition. Aston Villa versus Manchester City highlights and reaction as Bernardo blasts Blues, but Guardiola disagrees. Manchester City are away at Aston Villa in the Premier League this afternoon. Manchester City's unbeaten run was ended at Villa Park as Pep Guardiola's side slipped to a 1-0 defeat. Matty Cash's arrowed first-half strike was the difference between the two sides, as City lost for the first time since late August. Pep Guardiola's side started brightly, but were second best for much of the first half once Cash converted on 19 minutes. Although Erling Haaland spurned a great chance to equalise shortly after the Villa goal, with the Norway international's effort tame and easy for Emi Martinez. City were brighter after the break, but for all their possession, they failed to create too many clear chances, with Savinho seeing an effort blocked over the bar and Haaland sending a header straight at Martinez. Pep Guardiola said that hopefully Erling Haaland will not miss any games after crunching into the post late on in Manchester City's defeat to Aston Villa. Haaland threw himself at a square ball from Omar Marmoush as the clock ticked down in Villa Park and got enough on the ball to squeeze it into the goal. Unfortunately for him, Marmoush was offside when he played the ball, and to make matters worse, the Norwegian had slammed his body into the woodwork. He got up gingerly and was able to finish the game, and Guardiola hopes that he will brush off the knock. The League Cup game with Swansea was likely penciled in as a rest for Haaland anyway, meaning the priority will be making sure he is fine to take on Bournemouth in a week. Pep Guardiola said he is less worried about Arsenal's lead in the Premier League title race than he was earlier in the season, as he praised Manchester City despite their defeat to Aston Villa. City lost their first game in 1-0 matches in all competitions on the same afternoon that Arsenal beat Crystal Palace, to mean the Blues are now 6 points behind the league leaders heading into November. Arsenal have won all 4 of their matches since rescuing a point against City at the Emirates to emerge as frontrunners, as Liverpool have fallen away. Despite defeat to Villa, City remain ahead of the champions after Arne Slot's side suffered their 4th consecutive defeat on Saturday night. They had been 8 points ahead of City after 5 games, but now find themselves a point adrift after 9 matches. That is in part due to the collapse of the champions, but Guardiola is much happier with how City look now. Even in losing against Aston Villa, the manager felt that it was only fine margins that denied his team. Manchester City player ratings versus Aston Villa with 2 4-10s as Josko Gvardiol. Poor Manchester City player ratings as Aston Villa picked up a 1-0 win in the Premier League that ended a promising run for Pep Guardiola's side. Manchester City tasted defeat for the first time since August as they were beaten 1-0 by Aston Villa. Matty Cash's first-half strike was enough to condemn them to victory at Villa Park. With Nico Gonzalez only deemed fit enough for the bench after the knock he picked up in Villarreal, Tijani Reinders started in holding midfield for the first time this season. A bright start from the visitors soon gave way to pressure for the home team as they scored through Cash and looked to add another. City were better in the second half, but were unable to find an equaliser with Erling Haaland's late effort being ruled out for an offside against Omar Marmoush. So sorry, Erling Haaland set for Man City role as Pep Guardiola makes apology. Erling Haaland is the most used player in the Manchester City squad this season, and he isn't due for much of a rest anytime soon. Erling Haaland is too important to Manchester City to be handed a rest by Pep Guardiola as the Norwegian gears up for a season that could last 13 months. Nobody has started more games for City or played more minutes this season than Haaland, who has also played all but 1 minute of Norway's 4 World Cup qualifiers since June. His only night off for the Blues came in the Carabao Cup win at Huddersfield, and it looks certain he will be left in Manchester again next week when his teammates travel to South Wales to face Swansea in the 4th round. The 25-year-old's season started in the Club World Cup in June when he played 256 minutes across City's 4 games in the United States, and it will likely end across the pond next summer, with Norway on course for a first World Cup appearance in 28 years thanks to Haaland's goals. That could mean he plays upwards of 70 games this season, but Guardiola can't make a case for resting him, and will only do so if the title is wrapped up early. I'm so sorry for my colleague Ståle Solbakken from the national team of Norway, but I'm not thinking about that, said Guardiola. Maybe at the end, when we win the Premier League 10 points in front and 10 fixtures from the end, he'll take a rest. Now he feels fit, he feels fine. There are games when he might look tired and he isn't going to play. We are in a position right now. Champions League is massively important. The games we've played so far, and the next 2 games at home, will give us a really big chance to finish in the first 8. In the Premier League, I don't have the feeling Arsenal are going to drop many points. That is a reality. Now Liverpool lose their last few games in the league, but I saw them against United. They had incredible chances to win the game. I think Liverpool remain one of the main favourites. 3 or 4 points at this stage is nothing. I have the feeling both teams will lose few points, and that's why we have to be there. Nico O'Reilly, Aston Villa, and the best Manchester City debut that never happened. Nico O'Reilly will hoping to play for Manchester City and Aston Villa in very different circumstances to last year. When he could have made his debut, Pep Guardiola had never known his Manchester City squad be stretched like it was in December 2024. Not since a COVID outbreak ripped through the group at the end of 2020 had they felt so depleted, and this time there would be no matches postponed. A run of 8 defeats and just 1 win from their last 11 games had ruined the season and wrecked morale. As they prepared for a trip to Unai Emery's Aston Villa, there was not much hope of their fortune changing. Coming immediately on the back of a dismal defeat in the Manchester derby, Guardiola had his work cut out. With Nathan Ake and Ruben Dias injured and doubts over John Stones, City's coach considered something completely different. In the days before the Villa game, a relatively unknown academy midfielder, Nico O'Reilly, trained in the centre-back role for what would have been a daunting debut. Ultimately, Stones was deemed just about fit enough to partner Akanji, and O'Reilly was simply left on the bench. When Stones malfunctioned again and was taken off at half-time, Kyle Walker came on instead, and O'Reilly wasn't used. Guardiola agonised over whether to throw his academy players into the team during the most difficult stretch of the season. Jamai Simpson-Pusey was tried in defence when the form first started to turn, but otherwise the manager decided it was better to protect the youngsters from the pain and trust his senior stars. O'Reilly's debut instead came a month later against League One opposition as Salford visited the Etihad in the FA Cup. The 20-year-old played at left-back and looked good, coming up with a goal. That performance earned him a start in the next round at Leyton Orient, and as City faced a quarter-final exit at the hands of a Bournemouth side who were good value for their 1-0 half-time lead, O'Reilly was summoned from the bench and changed the game. He became the first-choice left-back for the rest of the season, starting 8 of the remaining 11 matches in a City team that secured Champions League football. After some wobbles at the start of this term, Guardiola turned to his makeshift left-back again, with Rayhan Ait-Nouri ruled out of the Manchester derby, and O'Reilly hasn't looked back. 8 starts later, City had 6 wins and 2 draws, with only Jeremy Doku managing more assists than O'Reilly in that time. Since his debut against Salford, the Blues have an 81% winning percentage with O'Reilly and 48% without, as drastically their losing record with him in the team, 9%, absolutely rockets up to 32% when he doesn't start. We want him, so we did the effort that we need to help him stay here longer. I'm really pleased because Nico is growing a lot, Guardiola said last month. Since he started playing, I think we have lost just one game in the FA Cup final against Crystal Palace. Nico helped us a lot. He improved his aggression, he's dangerous from set pieces, with the ball, and we are really pleased.